The Ferrari SF-25 in the Formula 1 Austrian Grand Prix has been extensively discussed and analyzed, especially concerning the lift and coast strategy, which played a key and highly visible role over the entire 300-kilometer race taking place in the challenging hills surrounding Spielberg. We covered this topic in detail just yesterday through a dedicated video, where we highlighted how this lift and coast phenomenon might conceal some underlying critical issues. Today, we are going to dive even deeper into the matter, focusing particularly on the ground clearance or ride height of the SF-25, which appears to have shown noticeable improvements compared to previous races. First, let's take a look at the time cost associated with the lift and coast strategy. By carefully comparing the average telemetry data of the top 4 classified drivers at the Austrian Grand Prix, we can gain a clearer understanding of how much earlier the drivers of the Ferrari cars were applying their brakes. The telemetry includes the numerical data, taking as a reference point the race winner, Lando Norris. The lift and coast technique was primarily employed during the first 2 stints of the race, where the higher fuel load on board results in a lower ride height and consequently greater shifts in load transfer throughout the car. According to the detailed information gathered and analyzed by the Italian media, it appears that wear on the plank and the thermal management of the brakes were likely the main factors that forced the 2 SF-25 cars to initiate braking earlier than ideal on many occasions. The underlying technical reason behind this strategy lies in the fact that by taking advantage of the engine braking effect to decelerate the car, the driver inputs the brake pedal at a relatively lower speed compared to usual. As a result, this reduces the thermal power produced by the braking system that needs to be dissipated, along with the lowering of the car's floor due to the additional load transfer. Lifting off the accelerator pedal earlier leads to a loss of time that, when considered in the overall race context, is significant and relevant. To clarify this effect, let us break down the calculations and analyze the numbers with the goal of estimating the magnitude of this time loss and making it easier to understand. Assuming a deceleration of 1 g, equivalent to 10 meters per second squared, achieved using engine braking, and considering that the Ferrari drivers lift their feet off the accelerator pedal earlier than the McLaren duo who were leading the race, we have estimated the time lost in the first 2 stints of the race. As can be observed through the telemetry data, Lewis Hamilton is the driver most penalized by this strategy, even though the radio messages from his race engineer, Riccardo Adami, concerning the so-called LECO or lift and coast strategy were less insistent compared to those from Brian Bozzi directed at Charles Leclerc. Lewis Hamilton, in total, lost only 1.3 seconds during the first stint by lifting off the throttle earlier relative to the pair of McLaren drivers at the front of the race. The most critical corner for this issue remains Turn 4, which is known to be the most demanding and violent corner on the Spielberg circuit due to the extra load transfer induced by the track's downhill gradient. Charles Leclerc was able to better contain these time losses, which became negligible and almost non-existent in the second and final stint of the race. When analyzing telemetry data in detail, it emerges that in the first stint, the top speeds between the Ferrari cars and the McLaren cars were quite similar, with Oscar Piastri exploiting the drag reduction system on Lando Norris to become the fastest in this aspect. Despite lifting off the accelerator pedal earlier, both Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc approached the braking zones more effectively, gaining valuable ground on corner entry. On corner exit, Lando Norris was able to better manage tire temperatures, resulting in a more effective traction phase through the slower corners. For Ferrari, the most difficult part of the lap was undoubtedly the final sector, due to a clear shortage of grip. As was also evident in qualifying sessions, the McLaren MCL39 single-seater demonstrates superior tire temperature management over the entire lap, enabling it to carry more speed through the middle of the last 2 corners. Lewis Hamilton himself mentioned in interviews that his car suffered from understeer on corner entry through medium-speed sections, which then transformed into oversteer on corner exit. For Ferrari, managing tire wear and degradation became a secondary concern when considering the overall thermal management of the car itself. Taking into account the unusually high external temperatures during the Austrian weekend, the data indicates a definite step forward for Ferrari, although the performance benchmark set by the McLaren remains a target yet to be reached. Updates introduced on the new floor have improved the rear stability of the SF-25 at the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg. The airflow beneath the car's floor is now able to better follow the geometry of the Venturi channels, resulting in a smoother aerodynamic flow. There is no longer the sudden aerodynamic stall or separation effect that was clearly visible in previous races. However, the main limitation in Sector 3 now comes from the lack of grip on the tires, which is constrained by operating temperatures that are higher than the ideal performance window. The SF25 single-seater also improves with reduced fuel load and hard tires. In the second stint of the Austrian Grand Prix, when carrying a lighter fuel load, Charles Leclerc succeeded in limiting the gap to Lando Norris in Sector 3, and the mid-corner speeds were comparable to those of the English driver. Moreover, the instructions from the pit wall regarding the lift and coast strategy decreased significantly, allowing the drivers to post lap times that were more comparable to those set by the two McLaren MCL39 cars. This may not represent a huge success, but it certainly marks progress and provides some grounds for satisfaction. The step forward achieved by the Prancing Horse's engineers and technicians was especially clear when considering the near-extreme temperatures encountered on the Austrian circuit. However, it is quite possible that the main problem has shifted once again toward managing ride height. The Spielberg track is undoubtedly one of the most demanding circuits in terms of skid block wear, which is unsurprising when analyzing the nature of the layout. On the other hand, the circuit features numerous uphill and downhill sections, along with many compression zones. The historic Ferrari team may have found the right compromise to run the SF25 with an improved ride height, managing to find a setup that works partially while awaiting the arrival of the new rear suspension system. Now all attention is focused on the upcoming British Grand Prix at the Silverstone circuit, where the SF25 will be put to the test again, and where we will hopefully be able to understand with greater precision whether these recent upgrades are truly effective and worthy of promotion. Behind the two McLaren cars, Ferrari maximized its result last weekend, proving to be the best of the rest, with Max Verstappen out of the picture from the start. Max Verstappen's retirement raises questions about Red Bull's true pace at its home track, but it's likely that the RB21 would have still secured the position of second or third fastest car, ahead of a disappointing Mercedes. However, the SF25's race pace still appeared significantly less competitive than McLaren's, although it was stronger than that of other rivals. A promising sign came from Charles Leclerc during his second stint on hard tires, where his lap times were nearly identical to those of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Even so, average lap data still showed a meaningful gap, around 0.3 per lap between Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris, and nearly 0.5 separating Lewis Hamilton from Lando Norris. The red team is clearly making progress, but problems remain with brake cooling and plank wear. The frequent lift and coast required by the drivers severely impacted performance, forcing them to ease off the throttle well in advance of nearly every corner. Overall, the Austrian weekend didn't hold many surprises. Both championships seem increasingly to be an internal McLaren affair, and closing the gap looks nearly impossible for the chasers. As the 2025 Formula One season approaches its halfway point, teams are already shifting focus to 2026. In the meantime, it will be crucial for them to bring short-term upgrades that are as effective and efficient as possible. The Austrian Grand Prix left little doubt about the current pecking order among the teams, even if the scenario wasn't exactly the same as in Canada. Race pace data confirmed McLaren's dominance, and closing the gap will be a monumental challenge for all other contenders.